Vertex form of a parabola, and we know this is a parabola because it's got an x squared in it, looks like this. Y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. You may also remember standard form for a parabola. We use it for a quadratic formula, and that is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. The a's in these two are exactly the same. So when we look at the formula that we're given in number 10, notice that it is in standard form that we could use for the quadratic formula. But if we want it to be in vertex form, we're going to have to change a few things. First of all, notice that the a value in this formula is 1. So I'm going to substitute that in. A equals 1. Then I need to find what the vertex is. The reason this is called vertex form is because this h and k that you see in the formula represent the coordinates for the vertex. So h is the x value and k is the y value of the vertex. Now you can find that by typing this equation into your calculator, the original equation that you were given, and then doing second trace minimum, moving to the left, pressing enter, moving to the right, pressing enter, and then pressing enter when it says guess. Another way to do this is to use a method that we called completing the square. And to complete the square in this problem, you're going to take this 16 here, divide it in half to get an 8, and then square it. So you take the value beside the x, divide it in half, and square it. 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 8 squared is 64. So to complete the square, we're going to have to add a 64. If we add a 64, we're also going to have to subtract a 64. And the reason we have to do that is because we don't want to change the equation except to write it in this form. So I added and subtracted a 64. So we've added and subtracted a 64, so really it's like we added nothing. But don't forget about that 14 like I mentioned, so we have a plus 14 here. Now we're going to take all of this stuff and we're going to factor it. Remember, to factor, we ask ourselves what multiplies to give us 64 and adds to give us 16, and that's going to be an 8 and an 8. So we can rewrite this as y equals x plus 8 squared, because 8 times 8 is 64 and 8 plus 8 is 16. And then we're going to also simplify the 64, the negative 64, and the 14. If we add those together, we get a negative 50. So that's two different ways to write this in vertex form. You can use your calculator and find out that the vertex is negative 8, negative 50. Or you can complete the square and factor. Now, why is it negative 8, negative 50? I get the negative 50 because I see a negative 50 in this equation. But remember, it's negative 8 because vertex form has a negative in it already. So negative and a negative together make the positive that you see in the vertex form here. Now for the second equation, I'm going to need to delete some of this that I've already done. So pause the video if you need to rewrite it. In the next problem, we have the equation of a circle that's given. And it asks us what are the center and the radius of the circle. The equation for a circle, remember, is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where the h and the k are the center of the circle and r is the radius. Alright, so you will notice that the equation that we're given doesn't look much like the equation for the circle, does it? So if I want to find the equation for the circle and determine what the center and the radius are, I've got to get this equation to look like this one. And in order to make that happen, I'm going to have to do something called completing the square. We did that in number 10 as well. First, I'm going to get all the x's together, and that's going to be an x squared plus 2x, and I'm going to leave a blank to complete the square. Then I'm going to get all my y's together, and that's going to give me a y squared and a 6y. And I'm going to leave a blank to complete that square. And then I'm going to just take a second and subtract this 3 from both sides to move it to the other side. So I get equals -3. Now, like we saw in number 10, to complete the square, we're going to take the value beside the x in this case, divide it by 2 and square it. So that gives us a 1 that we need to add. But I can't add a 1 to this side of the equation without also adding a 1 to the other side of the equation. I also need to divide this 6 by the y in half to get 3 and square that to get 9. But I also have to add a 9 to this side of the equation. So now I have a grand total on this side. -3 plus 1 plus 9 gives me 7. So on this side of the equation I have a 7. Now on the other side of the equation, I'm going to need to factor this. And when I factor this, I'm looking for two things that multiply to give me 1 and also add to give me 2. So that's going to be 1 times 1 gives me 1, and 1 plus 1 gives me 2. So I'm going to have an x plus 1 times an x plus 1. And we call it completing the square because now we have x plus 1 squared. I need to do the same thing over here. What multiplies to give me 9 and adds to give me 6? That's 3 times 3 and 3 plus 3. So I'm going to have an x plus 3 and a y plus 3 and a y plus 3. So I have y plus 3 squared. And now, as you can see, this looks like the equation for a circle that I needed from up here. So what are my center and my radius? My center is HK. H comes from inside the parentheses with the x, and the k comes from inside the parentheses with the y. But notice how there are minus signs in there already. So we're going to have to change the signs on those. So from down here, my x-coordinate for my center is -1, and my y-coordinate my center is -3. So I'm going to write those. But I also need to find the radius. Remember, over here we have r squared. So this number down here, the 7, is not r, it's r squared. So if I want to find out what r is, I have to take the square root of this. So my r value is going to be the square root of 7, which I can write as a decimal or just leave it like this because that would be simplest radical form.